if every time they called for a gun ban, if drug gangs in Toronto were to squawk and say, no, that's not right, then I would say, oh, good, it's actually hurting them. But first of all, drug gangs don't talk to the media. They don't, they don't use the political democratic process. And most importantly, they don't care what the law is. They've decided to break it anyways. It's, by definition, the law abiders who are going to be squawking about it. It's a perfect trick or trap that the liberal, even though the liberals are so truly clueless, they know the feedback loop. Law-abiding Western conservatives will squawk, and then that is their proof that they're doing something good, even though the problem is the gangbangers in Toronto. But let me take you back a week, Lorne. I have in front of me your column from the Edmonton Sun called UCP Firearms Motion, First Step in Firewall Against Feds Meddling. And the UCP, of course, is Jason Kenney's Conservative Party, the United Conservative Party. You had mentioned that you thought Bill Blair and Trudeau would introduce their gun bans just by a cabinet order in council as they're called, just by fiat, no debate, just announce it. Your article a week ago says that another approach might be for them to authorize cities to do this. Tell me about that option also.
Well, if they don't want to take the political fire themselves, and I think they probably don't in a minority situation, they could authorize municipalities, and in fact, they're starting to use the term communities, which is ill-defined and nobody really knows what they're talking about. But they could authorize municipalities to ban guns or certain types of guns, or maybe all handguns or all automatic rifles or semi-automatic rifles or whatever. They could choose categories that municipalities could ban if they want to. The fly in that ointment when it comes to Alberta is that, of course, municipalities all across the country are the creations of their provincial governments. They don't exist legally without authorization from the provinces. And so Alberta, what they did a week ago was pass a motion saying, we stand with law-abiding firearms owners in Alberta, and we encourage or certainly support the legitimate use of firearms, whether for sport or for vermin control, whatever you need. And we support all that. And that was a signal that should Ottawa give legal authority to municipalities to create gun bans, Alberta will stand in the way in Alberta. The municipalities here, Calgary and Edmonton, would probably be the only two who'd ask for it. But they will not be given permission by the provincial government to bring in gun bans. So that I thought was a very good step. The other thing the province has been talking about is appointing its own chief firearms officer. I think that's absolutely crucial because now that the CFOs across the country are appointed by the federal government, the feds pick people who will enforce the firearms laws as Ottawa wants them enforced. And if the province came in and appointed its own chief firearms officer, that person would be able to say, our community standards are different. We don't believe that law-abiding gun owners are the problem in violent crime. So we are not going to start seizing weapons left and right. They would be bound by any sort of federal law that you can't change that. But the interpretation of those laws, the time limits for handing things in, the exemptions for different activities. For example, if you can still get a sidearm license in Alberta or in Canada. It's not very common. But if you work in an area where there are a lot of bears, you can apply to the federal government for a sidearms license, and you may get one. Those sorts of things have been devolved to the provincial firearms officers who Ottawa can count on because they're loyal appointees of the federal government. Alberta could easily appoint someone and say, no, we're not going to tell the police to rush onto everyone's property who's used a firearm in self-defense against midnight robbers on their farm and seize all their firearms. We're just not going to do that. We'll let the legal process play out, and that would be very different from what the federal CFOs are doing in all the other provinces. So there are some good steps being taken here to try and shield us from the insanity of that panel in Toronto and the people in Ottawa who think exactly the same way.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show, which is a show I do every day. I do a monologue, interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at premium.com. www.rebelnews.com.